Hello, thanks for joining, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from, so just drop in the chat where you're listening. Make sure to ask any questions throughout. We'll be holding a Q&A at the end where we'll try to get around to everyone, but any we don't answer, we will make sure to follow up afterwards.
Yeah, we'll also be trialing our new translation tool during this webinar, so there's instructions in the comments for the setup of that. And there'll be polls throughout, so keep an eye on the poll section. And without further ado, we're going to pass you over to Paul, who's going to run through our webinar today.
Amazing. I believe we've got loads of people here, maybe over 600 or 700 people. I'm going to get the guys to let me know as we go through the conversation, but I think we have a number of people across Europe, perhaps across the world. So it's delighted to be with you today so that I can share a little bit of insight about where we see technology going in the space of collections and the industry of credit management and finance. So we're going to run through this incredibly quickly. There's going to be things that we're going to do that might blow your mind. It also may make you think and be more provocative, but hopefully we get an action from you. So let's start going through. So a little bit about me. I'm a co-founder of Ophelos. We were acquired by Intrum back in 23, but my history goes back a lot longer. I've been in finance. I've also spent an awful lot of time in technology. Most notably, I was part of IBM Watson back in 2014 when we used to call it the second coming of AI was around. So I've been in this industry around AI for about 12 years, but I'm delighted to be with you all today to share a little bit about my insights about where we are now and where we're heading. We've got perhaps less than 45 minutes to go through a number of different areas. I really want to talk to you about the factors that are driving the changes across the industry. And it's not just collections, it's every industry you can imagine, especially white collar work and knowledge work, because you can build an analogy for everything that I'm talking about today for other industries out there. We're going to talk about how the AI underpins the work that's going on in this space, and very specifically around what it means around agentic AI and the impact it's going to have. And then finally, and most practically speaking, we're going to share a little bit more about what it means in the space of AI collections and hopefully give you some insight of how this technology is going to change and is changing the industry. Just to take a breath here, and I apologize for the English pun of tectonic shift, but we've gone through a number of different changes from a technology perspective over the years. And this shift around AI and agentic AI and large language models and things like OpenAI, we really see these as big a shift as the internet was in the mid to late 90s. And beyond it just being a sort of incremental change that we may have recognized over the last 15, 20 years if we've moved the internet, mobile first technologies, we're really shifting into this new landscape where even the internet itself is going to be reshaped and refashioned around our use of AI. One of the things that I think drives me and drives this company is that we're in this stage where at the moment, many businesses, not just in this industry of collections or credit management, have an advantage against the consumer, against the debtor. And a lot of the work that we do to rebalance that equation is done through regulation and through compliance. However, the shift to this type of technology is really rebalancing that information asymmetry, because consumers now have the information, the knowledge at their fingertips to make the very best decisions. So when it comes to in a situation where somebody owes money, we don't have necessarily all the information available at where that history comes from and what that history of that debt was. they will absolutely and categorically know their rights. We've already seen GPT models that are dedicated towards debt advice for consumers. One of the flip sides of benefits, if you like, they'll know their rights better. They'll know what they're able to do and what they don't have to do. But the other aspect of it, a lot of these debt advice machines are encouraging the consumer to connect with the debtors. So one of the biggest problems we've had in collections, if you like, over the last 20 decades are those people who do not respond to us. And so some of the drivers here are going to push people back into the journey to at least speak to us. And so the flip side of this sort of information rebalancing itself is, I think it offers opportunity and opportunity for our consumers, but also opportunity for us to reinform and to re-engage. As I said at the beginning, this sense of growth is far more exponential, and we're really trying to understand exactly where we sit right now. We can see that we're trying to put some level of prediction of where we are. Now, to give you some sense, my journey started in 2014. The actual AI that we know today, that we sort of understand through ChatGPT and things like Claude, they started from a paper way back in 2017 called Attention is All You Need. It is a scientific research paper, but for those out there, I would encourage you to read it if you've got the stomach for it. But the reality is what we're seeing is this exponential growth. And the one thing that is really difficult as we go through this cycle is that humans are innately not great at understanding when exponential growth is going on. But we firmly see how technology is changing, the underpinning scope of what we can do and how we can completely change the business environment, and obviously very specifically within collections. So I guess it comes down to, I think we've heard a lot about AI, especially in the finance sector, where AI has been pretty prevalent in decision engines that have been, and machine learning that's been used to improve processes, improve decisions. The fundamental shift is that these systems are now capable of making remote decisions, able to think almost for themselves and take action, where we're now shifting from this idea of incremental. These systems are going to be able to deliver outcomes, whether it's for our customers or for our debtors, whether it's for our own users within our company. These flows of information and the decisions that are made within them are fully automatable. And that's the significant difference that we're starting to see. What does it mean in terms of how this technology is layered up, if you like? We put this position in terms of what does an AI stack look like? Well, I think most of you will be familiar that the world, sometimes less so in some markets, but the cloud is very much underpinning this ability to provide information at scale everywhere. And then obviously supported by this idea of these very high performant CPUs like NVIDIA's and AMD, who are able to accelerate the learning of these systems. Sitting on top of that are these foundational models, or another word you may hear is the word frontier models. So things like OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic AI's Claude, Gemini for Google. These are closed source systems that are available to all of us. And then you have these more open source systems. Many of you may have heard about DeepSeek undermining the sort of potential revenue opportunities for these big closed source businesses. But now there's this unbelievable opportunity for us to think about large language models and these foundational models behind the firewall of a company within a certain market, rather than relying on some of these original systems, if you like. And then finally, on top of this, and this is an area which is moving so quickly, it's very, very hard for us to understand exactly who the winners and who the losers are going to be, are these application layers that are sitting on top. And these application layers are really focused on given areas like, for example, 11 Labs in voice. Some are also working towards narrow domains like, hey, I'm going to build the very best system for collections or for credit management or for finance. And so we're going to start to see a whole bunch of different applications, but also companies moving into this space. The last time I checked, there's over 600 startups that are doing very meaningful things in the marketplace. A lot of that, of course, is in America, but we're seeing a lot more startups here in Europe as well. And I guess to some degree, this hopefully is a bit more understandable to you in terms of where we've been and where we believe the changes are coming. This sort of shows how technology continues to cantilever, continues to build on the shoulder of giants. So Google very much gave us this concept of great search systems and basically took the market. Things like Spotify have helped us make better decisions on recommending what type of albums or what type of music we want to listen to. And then we've had biometric face recognition from people like Apple. And then obviously from October 22, we had ChatGPT 3, where we had generative AI in this first concept that perhaps we had systems that weren't just systems of knowledge, but systems that could think, that could potentially reason, and that could potentially have the empathy that you want. And so we're now moving into this new space of agentic AI, which is really building on top of everything that we've seen in the past, but is completely changing the landscape in terms of the interactions that we believe can be had and the outcomes that we can deliver. I think it's just in this world of agents or agentic models, these things are not necessarily happening in silos. We know that in our business and workplace, we have a lot of complex processes. We have to do a lot of things to make sure we adhere to certain given rules or actions. And this is a great example, if you like, in one instance where you can see the type of agentic models that we're trying to build out here, which are, in one instance, managed by a supervisor, very much like a human supervisor, making sure that things are handled by the right agent. So you might have a vulnerability specialist. So if you're in a conversation with a customer and there are symptoms that this individual or signpost, this customer has issues, then it would automatically transfer to that specialist and perhaps set up a budget assessment. Likewise, when there are disputes, these things get handled in a much better way. And I think you can start to see how these things are interconnected, and that power of this multi-agent and sequential agents much more reflects the way that we work today. And so these things aren't just point-to-point solutions. They're trying to suggest the whole framework of action and activity that we can carry out. What does it mean in terms of AI and AI everywhere? Well, the reality is some of the existing systems that we rely on today are very much software as a service systems of engagement that still require a human to press buttons on. We see a different future where we'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of different workflows operating within an organization to carry out the very tasks that we've allowed for these systems to do, but without this requirement to have humans necessarily in the loop. Of course, as you can see in this example, there are cases where we want humans in the loop. Maybe it's for triage, maybe because the problem is so big that we want a human to actually digest it and take time, or even we may want humans in the loop for approvals and monitoring. So you can see this landscape is going to be built up over time. We're already working on many of these areas, but it's going to improve exponentially our ability to do the right thing by our customers, not just do this at scale. And finally, just to give you some sense of an example. So in our system already, if you have a system, a customer payment fails, and we soon pick up on those, the supervisor, an agent will pick up on the need to investigate This will be pushed through. Can we see anything from a vulnerability perspective? That rolls through the discussion. Maybe we pick up the phone to the customer to have that conversation through a voice AI. And then there may be an interaction back and forth around emails to request approval. And then at some point, we may have an agent in the loop just to check that everything is working, everything in the process is within the standards and within the regulatory framework that we're operating within. And that's just one very basic task or flow that you can see. But it's complex, right? It's complex for some of our existing systems to manage with. Just share a little bit as well. We started back in, I guess, Christmas 22, January 23, just very quickly after GPT-3 was released by OpenAI, to start looking at this idea about how can we interact with our customers. And this is a great example, a very specific example, where we had a customer, Joe, call us in and really taking from the information that they were struggling to pay any form of bills, let alone their energy bill right now. And we've built out our GPT responder, if you like, to be able to respond to these things. And this is a very specific use case or example where we've had the system respond back, both with this concept of empathy. I know a lot of people think that robots can't be empathetic, but you get the sense that the tone of voice is the right tone of voice for this individual. And obviously that tone of voice can change as well, but it's also looking at trying to signpost to that customer. We've gone well beyond this now, where we're able to take this to another level, where we can also help customers defer payment if 1 month is a real challenge for them. We can help set up payments with these systems. We really can automate the journey. And it's really important to understand that automation isn't just a question of cost. It's also a question of unbelievable customer service and experience. Just imagine for 1 second the ability for the system to respond back. It's doing it in a split second. Somebody isn't having to wait 2 days for an email to go back. These things are dealt with in the moment, at that moment in time that customer needs help. What does it mean in terms of the opportunities for this technology? Within Intrum and Ophelos, we have basically an AI research lab looking into the use cases. But this isn't a research lab in as much as, hey, we're going off for 4 years to find out what this technology can do. We're really looking at specific use cases. And you can see just some of the examples that we're using and thinking about using AI to improve the journeys and improve the outcomes for everyone. Right. I've been talking. We're going to move into a different gear, if you like. This is an interesting image, and I'm going to go into demo now mode, which people say don't deal with demos, don't deal with animals and dogs, but we're going to give it a go. This example is a picture of a mobile device. To some degree, this is probably outmoded. We don't know the devices we're going to be using in the future. I've already seen AI devices, if you like, which are just almost like a lapel mic or something that you have by the side of you, and maybe even a headset, where you can have these interactions with a system, with a service, without even needing to pick up a mobile phone. But in this instance, I'm going to pick up the mobile phone. Bear with me.
Hi, I'm Sebastian, a virtual agent calling from Ophelos on behalf of Spark Energy. Am I speaking with Paul?
Yes, you are speaking to Paul.
Is this a good time to speak about your energy account?
I'm actually in the middle of a webinar right now, but I'm sure they won't mind if we take a couple of minutes to deal with my energy account.
Okay, no problem. I'm calling because we've noticed that your direct debit payment method has been cancelled. I wanted to check if everything is all right and see how we can help.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've actually just switched banks, so I suspect my direct debit's just cancelled on that reason.
That makes sense. It's easy to forget to update your payment details when you switch banks. Is there anything I can help you with?
No, that's fine. I'll go back into the system. Do you know where I have to go for that?
Yes, you can easily update your payment details online. You can go to your Spark Energy account and update your bank details there. Would you like me to give you the link to your account?
Yeah, you can, but actually, just before you do that, can you just confirm when my direct debit cancelled?
Your direct debit was cancelled on February 1st, 2025. Would you like me to give you the link to your account now?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Thank you. I'm going to go now, though, so I've got to go and join the rest of the team. Okay, bye. So hopefully that gives you some sense of the type of conversation that can be had. And that's a very basic conversation, very simple use case. And I'll talk about why we like simple use cases to start. And let me just, hopefully you can see this page. But you can understand this conversation is not like an IVR. It's not like a robotic voice. This is much more conversational in the way it can talk to us. But even more important than that, to my mind at least, is the rich data that we get from these conversations. And so you can see I've had multiple test conversations. This is a demo system. And I'm just going to click on my name here just to look at the conversation. So we've asked the system to think about, has the customer committed to resetting up that direct debit? In future, we'll have it automatically happen. But in this instance, we're really trying to suggest to the model, have you qualified this customer in? And is this going to happen? And then obviously we can follow up with this situation when people don't go on and do their DDs. But you can see all the conversation. I can choose to store any type of information. I can ask it to do any type of things, but you can see that we are being compliant from an understanding and monitoring perspective. We can obviously set alarms if certain conversations are being had, that we need to address it with a human being within the loop. But every single piece of information we're able to keep, we're able to understand, and then basically improve that individual's customer journey, or indeed improve the overall customer journeys that we have within our system. So hopefully that gives you a sense of voice and how it can work with agentic AI. I'm just going to share another use case. And let's just go here, present, share screen. This is a really interesting one. This is in our research lab. So please be warned, this is not live. It can go wrong. But we have an interesting use case here where we do a lot of outbound communication as part of a collection process. Obviously, we do a lot of payments as well. This is it where we've essentially let the large language model, agentic model, to decide how it wants to communicate with the customer. In this instance, we're saying that we want to be a bit sterner or harsh with the customer. Maybe it's at the end of the journey. Maybe there's a reason why we want to personalize it in this way. We can choose for the system to be creative or not. And in essence, you saw that image. We're now asking this large language model. I do apologize. It's not the fastest. We've got this in research right now. But essentially, the model is going off to decide how it wants to interpret it. So we've put some guidelines. But I do warn you that these are completely generative systems. So they're choosing how they want to pull the information together. Of course, in the future, you can contain it. So for example, I can say, hey, you don't need to do it this way. You can do it this way. So you can set rules around these generative AI systems in a way where you can control what is output. But to give you a sense of examples, look, this is how the system, so it's nothing to do with me. This is how the system has generated a response. So it's had this template and it's decided, okay, you've given me some guidelines here. I need to be a little bit harsher with the customer. I need them to understand that this is really important for your intention. Some of this, by the way, may not work in your market. I fully understand that. The point isn't about what it's delivered. It's how it's been able to adapt and decide how it wants to do it. So we very much believe these type of technologies will exist in the future. They will be more controlled. You know, we're an FCA regulated company. We may not write things in capital bold letters. We may not say immediate action required. So we understand how to do it. But the subtlety of it is we'll be able to change and we'll be able to do many of these different things at scale. The interesting thing, and I'm just going to switch back now to the slides. Just get the guys to come back. Great. There are many different use cases, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those use cases in a minute. But suffice to say, we've looked at multiple use cases. We've even looked at very simple use cases, very boring use cases about how can we improve the data process and the data ingestion. We get a lot of information from our clients. We pass information back. How can we improve all of those steps along the journey, including just knowing whether something is a postcode or a zip code, making sure that we've formalized or unformalized somebody's name. These are very simple things, but they're quite hard after a time to do at scale with systems of record or rules to manage that process. So we're seeing multiple different use cases. So I want to talk more practically for you about how to get started with AI, perhaps in your business, perhaps in general day-to-day life, because these are things that we're going to see pervasive across industries. I think here are some areas. These are 4 areas that I think you need to start to think about. So, for example, many people, and I know today there are restrictions on using these type of models like GPT and Claude, but we would always recommend that you get used to them. Be very careful by using the data that you put into these systems. Make sure you do get the approvals. But just getting used to managing these systems, seeing how they respond, seeing what they pull out, is a pretty amazing process. And the limits of them are becoming smaller and smaller. So even today, improving developer productivity or bringing the skills of developers to people who've not usually had those skills is much more capable. Starting with simple use cases, we believe in the real use case of starting with something small, being able to do these things very quickly. To give you an example, the emailer that you saw earlier that created its own creative email, that was done in a few days. And of course, it's not production. It's not connecting to the back end of our systems. But actually, the reality of this technology is we do believe you can iterate very quickly. Our view is build small to start with, and then to extend those use cases and build them into far bigger, far more complex systems that will allow you to improve outcomes and engagement. Prepping resources. This is probably later in the stage, depends on where you are on your journey. But prepping resources, having your knowledge base is ready. Are they good fit for reading? The other day, we went through and changed our API documentation to interact with our system, because these systems are now going to go off and read those APIs and then potentially build the code to interact with our system as a record. So you see this thing where the documentation and the quality of that documentation is going to matter. Interestingly enough, just anecdotally, one of the things we're seeing with data now is synthetic data, not just real data, but synthetic data that's made up by these models is also going to be incredibly important on your journey. And then finally, and a plug for us within Interim is we are really pushing our own sort of strategic direction through AI and technology. We know it matters to us, but we also know that it matters to our customers. But actually dealing with companies like us, people who are taking this journey, we spend a lot of time, and I personally spend a lot of time with COOs, other operations within our clients to support them on taking this discovery, this journey of discovery, if you like, with us as we go through that stage. We're a little bit ahead of them, but that's okay. We want to share where we think the market is going and how things are going to operate in the future. And look, I've talked a lot. I am going to stop in a minute, but I also want to just share with you, we will share with you our white paper called Looking Ahead, the Age of AI Everywhere. There's a lot of great documentation to read out there. There's a lot of things being said around the market. As I said, this is a voyage of discovery. This isn't going to happen overnight. But stepping into this journey is one of the most important things that we can all do. And then finally, I think, team, we're ready to bring this to a halt and see what we can do next. Great. Okay, so I've got these questions coming up. Can these tools and functionalities be used outside of a Ophelos platform? Yeah, I think, Louisa, the way that we're looking at, these tools are possible. So we've used some foundational models, and then we've built on top. We have, we're happy to work with our clients to think about how you do this yourself. So this is not about necessarily us doing the work for you. Yes, we do actually sell some of our technology services. But in instance, as I gave you an example before, we work directly with our clients to help them think about some of the use cases they can work out and how to build these functions and tools themselves. So hopefully that's answered it. Yes, we can do some of it and help you and support you, but we can also provide the training enablement in terms of understanding how these things can work for you. Hopefully that answers your question. Is there a business case that evaluates the effectiveness of the call based on customer coverage? Well, that's really interesting. There are obviously a lot of models out there already. We have agent networks. We have a decision engine that decides who to call, when to call, and at what point to try to hyper-personalize it. So I think you can evaluate. So we have systems that exist today. They're more traditional systems using existing methods, machine learning, linear regression models. As to the use of these new models, I do think they're going to be able to add additional value to the process. But it will be a question of what's the right appropriate model to use for these type of decisions and to understand. But yeah, from a business case perspective, I think you could probably ask that question of Claude. You might need to ask it a little bit more detail, but yes, I do see solutions out there for this type of use case. Yeah, that's a great question, Paolo. Systems are becoming better and better. We have seen from different models. We work with a company in the UK who spent a lot of time doing speech to text. And so I'm happy to give the information afterwards, Paolo. But they're very, very strong at understanding accents, different variations. Obviously, we have different languages as well. But I just see these models improving very quickly to deal with all these different types of intonation, accents, you name it. So it's not working. Some of these things don't work perfectly today, but actually in the future, I think they're going to be very, very accurate in this space. Well, we just great question on the voice. We haven't. We're actually testing it. We have a service on. We're just going live actually with voice AI for a very small use case, actually in a real estate environment. I won't go into too much detail because it's confidential, but we don't have it live in any debt conversations. In part, as I said to you earlier, some of this is about starting small and growing into it. So simple use cases will very much be the first thing we'll do. Most likely to be very simple nudges like, hey, your direct debit's cancelled. Can we help you set it up? Getting into more deeper conversations, I think, will happen over time. But again, I think this is really about choosing and making the right decisions on how to start. I do believe voice will be very prevalent in the next couple of years. You can see how the ability to engage is quite remarkable in as much as it's a sort of similarities, if you like, to a human talking, but to be able to do that at scale, to give you some idea, there are no limitations on these systems. You could potentially make up 1 million concurrent voice calls from Sebastian, if you liked, at the same time. Now, I'd have to throw an awful lot of energy and compute power at it, but it gives you some idea, Eric, of what the capability is. But today, no, there will be. We will talk with our clients as we roll these things out. We work with our clients very closely, but it's most likely to be some of these areas around the outside first as we step into this area of voice. Yeah, this is a great one. Well, we're very fortunate within Ophelos as part of Interim. Interim works across 17 different markets in Europe. They have their own operate model with their own regulation and compliance. And so we're working very closely with our markets, the Interim markets, to discuss and work on all these technology changes that are going on. Obviously, we come very much from a technology perspective, but they understand the business, the regulation, the legal framework. So that's how we're navigating through it. We also, in addition, we're an FCA regulated company. We've continued to have conversations. We had a very long, meaningful workshop with them at the FCA in the UK. And obviously, we're exploring the impact of the EU AI Act as well. But it's going to be interesting, right? I think on the larger framework of the macro changes in the world right now, this is still a moving feast. We will always look to find the right balance of opportunity and risk to ensure that actually we're doing the right thing. Ultimately, I believe the most important North Star for any company, and if you go back to some of the slides earlier, is focusing on the customer. If we create great customer experiences, navigating through regulation is going to be a lot easier. Thanks, George. No, I actually don't think so. No, I mean, yes, you're right. We are majoritively a B2C. We do some small, medium business work in terms of caring for small businesses. But no, I think this is all about building up the knowledge base, building up the framework that you want the AI and even on the voice AI to work. So no, I don't see limitations. I think, interestingly enough, there will be possible foundation models that will really target this type of area, like pension funds, specific financial sectors, if you like, and training from the bottom up, right? Where I think it's very obvious for collections. There's a very obvious use case with consumers. There's a very obvious impact that can be had if you can engage at scale. These more specialized, bespoke areas, I do see a huge lift in terms of the opportunity to train these models very specifically around that domain. But I think it will take time. And I also see new entrants coming in and potentially building their own large language models for this area. Do you think the new AI regulation and the principle of transparency will harm the success of conversational AI's dedicated to recovery? ELO. I think there's got to be dialogue between the regulators, including the European Union, and businesses and companies like ourselves. We see it's not always easy to navigate this pathway. There are obviously lots of complications, including from a data privacy perspective. But this is dialogue that you need to have at the very senior levels. Some of the EU AI Act lacks some understanding of the practicality and actually how this technology works. I would like to see something that really understands it rather than just necessarily building on the back of GDPR. And as I said previously, I think there is a side of this where this is so new. We're learning what we should be doing. But for us as a company, and certainly for myself, the first principles are always around the customer and how you treat the customer. If all you do is drive this from a cost perspective or an effectiveness or efficiency perspective, this isn't going to work for you. And therefore, I think there is a space. I do think there's a space for collections. I do think there is a space. You can see the transparency. We can share the information of everything that's going on, but we're going to have to build the guidelines around how we do these things. But we need to do it as an industry. It isn't just going to be one company that's going to solve that problem. Amazing. I think we have answered everything. Team, are we done? I don't even know what time it is. We've got 5 minutes to spare. Abby, Eden.
Hey, sorry, just trying to find our microphone. Hello. Yeah, so many great questions coming in. I think we're going to just have to answer some of them over email at the end. We've probably got time for one more if you want, Paul.
The hardest one you can find.
Hardest one. What we got? We got Bruno's.
Yeah, this is great. Great question, Bruno. Can the system handle customer disputes? Where would you need to do some background checks to understand if the dispute is valid? This really depends on your ability to connect the dots to. So let's describe this. If your system is a system of engagement, so you have a voice AI, it wants to handle customer disputes, you can essentially do this either asynchronously or synchronously, depending on your access to the information where this information on background checks is held. So, for example, I guess if it's in the UK, we have background checks called the DRB check, which just checks the criminal records of an individual. There's no reason, I haven't checked actually, by the way, on the DRB, on the government, whether you can't just create an API connection for the system so that that voice would, or your GPT would make a call back to the government, make that API call, get that information response back. I know today those responses don't happen immediately. Perhaps they would in the future, or perhaps it's an email conversation where it does it makes the call, the information gets put back into your system, and then 2 or 3 days later or a week later, we upload the document and then hand it back. So yes, probably one of the more complicated use cases, Bruno, but definitely something that, yeah, quite interested in building myself. So yeah, really interesting use case. And yeah, it's been great to share. And by the way, look, thank you to everybody who's participated. I know it's a long time, especially to listen to me. But we want to do more. We want to do more collectively. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. And we'll be in touch with the white paper. I know a lot of you were asking about, will we get a transcription? So we'll send that all out to you. And we'll get back to all of your questions that we didn't answer, because there's quite a few in the chat. But thanks for being so engaged. Thanks for joining, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.